Hi everyone! So last week, one of you reached out and pointed out to me that I apparently have never done a video on my top favorite Alocasia before, and when you brought this up, I thought for sure that could not possibly be accurate, but I double checked and yes, you were correct. So this is long overdue, but today we're going to be taking a look at, I believe I have a total of 10, it's a little bit more than 10 because there's a few variations I like on certain species, so you'll understand more as we go along, but we're going to be looking at basically 10, might end up being like 12 or 14 of my favorite Alocasia. Now I do own some of these, but in case you missed my last video, spider mites have made a return to my household and the first plants they went after were my Alocasia. So instead of bringing them out in front of me right here, right now, and risking spreading spider mites to plants in my office where there currently are none, I'm just going to be filming and putting in footage of them, but just know it is what my Alocasia that I own currently look like. But let me scooch over a little bit so I have room to put the pictures of the ones that I don't own up on screen for you. All right, everyone. So these are going to be in no particular order because I honestly tried putting them in order from like most favorite to least favorite, and it just wasn't happening. It was too difficult. But I want to start out with one of my favorite Alocasia that I currently own. And in conjunction with that, I want to talk about one that is very similar to it that I wish I owned. And some of you are probably going to be like, it's so similar, why would you want to own it? Looks almost identical, but not quite. So the one that I actually do own is my black velvet Alocasia. This is one of my favorite Alocasias. I love velvety leaf plants. This is a super thick, highly textural velvet leaf that is super deep green with beautiful white veination on it. Another thing I absolutely love about the black velvet Alocasia, it is the one Alocasia that I own, that didn't sound right. It is the Alocasia that I own that will stay the smallest. So out of all the Alocasias I own, this is the one that is going to grow the most compact. It's not going to get as tall as my other ones. The leaves aren't going to get much bigger than what you just saw. And I actually kind of appreciate that about this plant. Now, the one that I want that is very similar to this, by the way, you guys, I will flash up on screen as we go along today the actual like scientific names for these plants, but I'm going to refer to them by their common names because more often than not, when you see Alocasia for sale, they're listed by their common names and not their scientific names. But the next one I want to look at is actually called Alocasia Ninja. Now, this is very similar to the black velvet Alocasia. If I can find like a good side-by-side comparison of the two to flash up on screen for you, I will. But it is a velvety leafed plant. However, it is slightly darker, at least most of the ones that I've seen pictures of are slightly darker in terms of the shade of green that they are. The white veination is slightly more pronounced. It's slightly wider. The leaf shape itself is a little bit more round. It seems to come to less of a point and seems to have like a rounder sinus and less of a separation at the top. So it is a little bit different. And if you're looking at it like it's not different enough for me to want to own one over the other or own both, that's fine for you. But I think that Ninja one is absolutely gorgeous and I would love to own that one someday. I do know, I used to see it for sale on Plantarina's site, which obviously Plantarina is no more. I have not really seen them sold much anywhere else. Of course, I haven't really actively sought it out either, but it's definitely my vibe in terms of Alocasia. I just love velvety leaves and I love pronounced veination on those plants. And once again, I like that it stays nice and small and compact. So along those lines, let's look at the Alocasia Frede next, because that is also on my list. Now I'm going to show you a nice mature one on screen here. I do own one of these now. One of you was nice enough to mail me a corm when I did my last wish list video and mentioned that it was on my wish list. I have since propagated that corm. It is still rooting in soil. It's in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet. As you can see right now, it has one leaf and one leaf on the way out. It has given me a total of 3 leaves, you guys, since I propagated that corm. The first one has since died off. It's not growing as fast as some of my other Alocasia, but I have heard that that is not uncommon. It also is rooting a little bit more slowly. And when I propagate corms and I pot them up, typically I don't see a ton of leaf growth going on until the roots get acclimated to the soil and really start to spread around a lot, which it is starting, the roots are starting to spread a bit more. So I think I will start to see the growth of the leaves and number of leaves start to pick up soon. But you may have noticed it does not really look anything like this right now, and that's not uncommon. A lot of times alocasia, similar to almost any kind of plant, but I guess I could compare it to anthurium, would be the number one thing that comes to my mind, where lots of times the leaves don't look exactly like they will when they're mature, when they're young. And typically that means both in terms of veination for number one, plants that have, or alocasia that have light colored veination. You know, I take that back though, you guys, because I think I have a propagation. Yeah, I have a propagation of my black velvet in there too. And the veination is pretty pronounced, but for some alocasias, that veination will not show up when they're juvenile. It takes a little while and a few leaves coming in before you start to see that. But the shape of the leaves can change drastically, just like we can see happen on anthurium. So obviously the leaves on my little baby Frede are not looking anything like this shape yet, but they will get there with time. But I absolutely love the look of this plant, because once again, it is a velvety green leaf with that strong contrasting white veination, but then it has like a toothed shape to the leaf, meaning that it does kind of like a zigzaggy type pattern on the sides. It is a slightly longer leaf. And even though I'm pretty sure Alocasia Frede is considered a jewel alocasia, you guys, if I'm wrong, I will flash it up on screen for you, letting you know that I am wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's considered a jewel alocasia. But even then, it definitely gets larger than a lot of the other jewel alocasia. It's going to get longer petioles and bigger leaves than, for example, the black velvet alocasia or the ninja alocasia that we just looked at. It's just, when it comes to the jewel alocasias, I tell you guys all the time, jewel means that they're going to stay more small and compact versus non-jewel. That's not a lie, because even the Frede, like a big mature one like this, compared to some of the non-jewel alocasias on the list today, it looks like a little tiny dwarf compared to the size of some of the non-jewel ones. You'll understand when we get to those. But within the jewel ones, there's just a large range of size in terms of how tall they get, how long the petioles get, how big the leaves get, etc. But absolutely love the Frede. I can't wait for mine to get to looking like this. Now, we'll give an honorable mention to the variegated version of the Alocasia Frede. I really don't have any super high desire to own this one. Does it look good? Yes. But alocasia, variegated alocasia, especially variegated jewel alocasia, tend to have, their variegation tends to be less stable. And when it goes, it tends to go. I mean, I've had some people tell me sometimes it will come back, but most people's experience that I have talked to is you start getting less and less leaves with variegation, and then once that last variegated leaf goes, it typically doesn't come back. So for that reason, I'm just not like chomping at the bit to get a bunch of variegated jewel alocasias in particular. But do I think this is a beautiful plant? Yes, that's why I'm giving it an honorable mention. But next up, let's look at two other alocasias that I personally own that are jewel alocasias, but they're not a velvet variety. And the first one I want to look at is my Alocasia Bambino. This still follows the fact that I love dark colored leaves. So this is a very dark green, like moving sort of towards blackish looking leaf. It is a nice narrow leaf, but it does have that kind of tooth shape like we saw on the Frede to it. And of course it has that beautiful white silverish type veination, which I don't know, it's been a while since I've mentioned this to you guys, but I don't know if you guys are aware, but most of the time on alocasia, when you see that silvery white veination, that is actually a type of blister variegation. So it's similar to the silver variegation that you see on, for example, Scindapsus pictus exotica and Argyrius and Silvery Ann and my Silver Splash. Any kind of silver Scindapsus, the variegation that you're seeing on them is what is known as blister variegation. And blister variegation sometimes can present just in the formation of the veination on a plant. And typically on your alocasias, that's what's happening. That is actually blister variegation in that veination on that plant. So same applies here with the Alocasia Bambino. Now, another thing I love, which I forgot to mention this about the black velvet alocasia, on the backside of those leaves, they are kind of a purplish reddish type color. Now, that is another thing that is slightly different from the ninja. From my understanding is that the backsides of the ninja leaves are more of a green. I don't think they're even red or purple at all. I could be wrong about that. If somebody knows, comment down below and let me know, but I'm pretty sure they're just green on the back. But the back sides of the Bambino leaves are that super deep purplish color, which I think is absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful. Also, I kind of appreciate the Bambino because the Alocasia amazonica poly, it's like the same kind of shape, but way bigger leaves. And I kind of don't, I like the shape, but I don't like how they look when they get super large. Like it's just like overkill for me. And so that's another thing I like about the Bambino is that you get the shape of those leaves, but in a more small, compact presentation, if you will. Absolutely love my Bambino. I am not happy that it has spider mites right now, especially since I just had a new corm kick off in the middle of it that's starting to fill in. It's going to become like this beautiful bushy alocasia if the spider mites will just leave it alone. But the next alocasia that I own that I want to take a look at, this is the first, what I will call high-priced plant that I ever bought, and I didn't even like buy it with my own money. I had gift cards for my birthday to one of my local nurseries, and even then I was like sweating it buying it because it was the most expensive plant I'd ever bought and owned at the time, you guys. And I was like, oh my God, I'm probably gonna kill it. Like, you know, that whole panic mode sets in for some of us. It's done fine. And thankfully, I think they've come down in price now. I believe I paid like, I want to say somewhere between like 65 to 70, that wasn't 70, maybe like $68 for my Alocasia Cpra when I bought it. Now, we did recently repot this plant deeper because the corm was getting extended and leggy and grown out. And you guys, it has pushed out a new leaf. I think it might be working on another one right now as well. And I just noticed yesterday that a corm baby has kicked off and is starting to push out an entirely new plant, which is what I told you in the video where we repotted all those Alocasia for that reason is likely to happen. That's why I said don't always harvest all of your corms out when you do that, especially if they're still attached to the mother plant. I took none of the corms out of the Alocasia Cpra when we did it because there were no loose ones. And then because we repotted it, something, when you pot that corm deeper, when it's grown out like that, something tells that plant to start kicking off corm growth. So that plant should start to fill in more now, which will be nice because the last time I repotted it, it kicked off a new corm as well. And then Theo ripped it out and well, that was that. So I'm super excited about that. And you guys, look how much the roots have spread around in there, like new root growth off of that corm from where we buried it lower. I'm telling you guys, I know a lot of you were like, well, what can't we just like chop it down? It'd be easier if you just chopped it down instead of burying it deeper. You can, but like I said, you're running a risk. I've heard from a lot of people that when they do that, sometimes it just doesn't grow back. And then you just got to hope that there was a corm down in there that will kick off. And sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. But I know for a fact that when I bury them deeper like this, new corms tend to kick off growth and the roots spread around and new leaves start to shoot up pretty quickly. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't lose a few leaves in the process, like I said in that video, but it works, you guys. And so if it works, like the whole adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's not broke, so I'm not going to fix it. If I want to cut it down the next time instead of burying it deeper because I can't keep going deeper, well, now I've got a new corm that's kicked off. So if I cut it down, the mama plant, and she does nothing, she's already replaced herself, and I don't have to worry about having like basically a dead plant. Just my 2 cents. But what I absolutely love about the Cpra are the color of these leaves. This beautiful coppery red leaf, that is Cpra, stands for, I think, copper in Latin. Once again, if I'm wrong about the language, I will flash it up on screen for you, but I'm pretty sure that Cpra is copper in Latin. But one of the other things that I absolutely love about the Cpra is the texture of these leaves. I like to say that this plant has abs, right? I know some people get a little bit creeped out by the texture. I want to say it was Unplanned Parenthood. I think she's the one that used to have like, she was just totally creeped out by this plant. And then I think she now owns one and has kind of gotten over it. But I remember her saying that she felt like it looked like an alien and it just creeped her out at one point. But I just think it looks like a leaf that's been working out hardcore. And it's got a giant like 6-pack or more than a 6-pack. And I just think it looks really cool. Now, this is a jewel type Alocasia, but it can get massive, massive. I will probably be showing you Sydney plant, guys. mature one of these because he has like one of the best looking ones I've ever seen. This is multiple plants in one pot. He makes no qualms about that, you guys. There's a lot of corms that are kicked off in there, but it is absolutely gorgeous. So the leaves can get relatively large. The one complaint I have about the Alocasia Cpra is that it does have a tendency to grow longer petioles, or not grow, it just naturally has longer petioles than a lot of other alocasia. They tend to go all over the place, you guys. I mean, I have to restrain mine with chopsticks, twine, hair clips, whatever I can find to keep them upright. I know for a fact that Sydney Plant Guy has to do the same thing with his. It's not a question of is it getting enough light, too little light, or anything like that. I've grown mine in multiple locations. Southern facing window. It is currently in an east facing window. I've tried it temporarily in a north facing window. No matter where I put it, the petioles still get crazy like that, you guys. And now I will say, if you rotate the plant on the regular, you have less tendency of having all of them go one direction and then having a very lopsided plant that wants to fall over all the time. But it is just one of those things about this plant. It is a little bit annoying, but how beautiful these leaves are is worth it, at least in my opinion. Okay, next up is another alocasia that I own. This is a very different alocasia. I honestly, you guys, I still couldn't figure out if it's a jewel alocasia technically or not. I really don't think it's actually considered a jewel alocasia, but it is one of the rare alocasias that is not considered a jewel alocasia that actually stays relatively small, and that is the Alocasia Tiny Dancer. Now I'm going to show you mine, but spider mites, you guys. Spider mites, and I had a little bit of an issue with the roots when we recently repotted it. So it lost a bunch of leaves recently, like a bunch, like it had probably 3 times as many leaves. But I should have a good picture of when it still had a ton of leaves, so you can see how cute it is. I have seen these popping up in stores more, at least locally where I am. I can't recommend them enough, you guys. These little tiny cup leaves on these petioles that are wide at the base and then go narrow at the top make it look like they're just tiny little leaves, and if it gets blown by wind or if you have a ceiling fan going, they look like they're dancing, hence the name Tiny Dancer. I just think it is a very cute, very different, very sculptural looking alocasia, and that is part of the reason that I absolutely love it. Now, I have seen pictures where people have grown these outdoors in places like southern Florida where they can survive outdoors, and they can get relatively large, but they still aren't going to get as large as most of your other non-jewel alocasias, which is why I kind of feel like it should be considered a jewel alocasia. But it seems like through all my research, technically it's not. But just know that it does stay relatively small and compact, especially if you're growing it indoors in your house. But let's move on to some of the larger non-jewel alocasias on the list. And this next one is one of my favorites. I would love to own it someday. I will probably grow it from a corm if I do, because everybody I know who owns one has gotten it, and within a few months it's had spider mites, which makes me think that odds are it probably had spider mites on it unbeknownst to the people when they got it. And that's part of the reason I like growing alocasia from corms, is they are such spider mite magnets that you don't really have that issue or run that risk if you have a corm versus if you bring home a plant. Because as we saw at my recent plant shop tour of Rubel's, almost every alocasia, I think the purple sword alocasias didn't have spider mites, or at least they didn't look like they had spider mites, but every other alocasia there had obvious spider mites on it, you guys. So if you are worried about, if you want more alocasia, but you're worried about bringing spider mites into your home unknowingly, find somebody who has corms, buy a corm off of them. I'll link my video down below on how I propagate corms for you, and just do that. It's a safer bet, at least in my experience. But Alocasia Stingray. Ever since this plant first came on my radar, I think it was because Craig Miller Randall had one, if I recall correctly. I think that's the first place I saw it, was on his Instagram page. And I love sea life. Like, my other favorite thing to do outside of plants is snorkeling and recording sea life on vacations, which it's been a hot minute. But this November, I will be back at it. And if you guys are interested in seeing any of that, comment down below and let me know. But these leaves are shaped kind of in the shape of a stingray, hence the name of the plant, which I think is absolutely adorable. Now, this is a leaf that is going to get relatively large. This is a plant that is going to get relatively large. Now, in addition to this, there is a variegated version of this that I also think is absolutely beautiful. I do believe I added it to my wish list this year. So both of these are actually on my wish list. Same shape to the leaves, same growth pattern, everything, just with that white variegation. And unlike the jewel alocasias, the variegation tends to be more stable. Now, is it 100% stable? No. When I say it's more stable, I just mean it's less likely to revert on you. It is less likely to revert as quickly on you. Now, everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different with that, you guys. So like if some of you are screaming at the screen, I haven't had any problem with my variegated Frede, and I've had it for 3 years. Everybody's conditions are different. Every plant is different. So I'm not saying that you can't have that experience, but I'm saying in general, they tend to be more unstable in the jewel varieties. But this is an absolutely stunning plant. Once again, very sculptural. If you guys haven't figured out yet, I really like unique looking sculptural plants, like my Raven ZZ, the plant that we had looked at recently in my summer favorites. Like I said, I find the Tiny Dancer to be very sculptural as well. Eye-stopping sculptural looking plants are one of my jams, along with velvety dark colored heart-shaped leaves with silver veination. I just think it's a beautiful plant. It's a beautiful statement piece. I don't really have a lot of room for non-jewel alocasias in my house. That is honestly one of the biggest reasons why I don't have any of them. I don't know. I'm thinking right now about some places I could put one. The other thing is I find that, so these non-jewel alocasias typically want pretty high level of light, which is great because I have a ton of southern facing windows in my house, but I don't have a lot of space for a large plant like that in those windows necessarily, except maybe in my bedroom. And what I have discovered is with non-jewel alocasias, if you get them in too low of light, like they just do not do well, and to the point where I'm not even sure how they would perform under a grow light. So once again, that is part of the reason that I don't currently own any non-jewel ones in my house. I own Alocasia portoras, which I did not include on this list, in my backyard, which I absolutely love, and you can grow them indoors. So let's just take a look at those real quick, even though they're not on the list. These are gorgeous, you guys. They have these very spade-shaped leaves with this kind of rippled texture to them that stick straight up. They get very large. They have a slight speckling to the petioles. In my experience, they grow relatively quickly, although mine didn't start actually coming back in this year until a month ago, and they haven't been growing quite as quickly, but I think it's because I need to remulch my flower beds, and I haven't, so the moisture level isn't retaining to the level that they want. So that's on me, but typically they grow very quickly and they multiply very quickly. Corms kick off all the time in my experience with the Alocasia portora. So if you have room, and I mean, they get tall, like, I don't know if I have hopefully I have a picture I'm flashing up for you. I might not. They get taller than my fence in my backyard at their peak. So if you have high ceilings and that's southern facing in my backyard, if you have high ceilings next to like a southern facing unobstructed window, this plant would absolutely love it. And if you need a large statement, stunning plant to put in that area, highly recommend this. Now, I do have one variegated plant that I actually put on this list, and I just put the variegated version because honestly, it's my preferred version of this plant, and that is the Alocasia Adora, I believe is how it is pronounced. And this is another non-jewel alocasia, so this is going to get very large as well. Potentially, the mature ones I've seen, which granted, maybe they weren't fully mature, haven't been quite as big as the Alocasia portoras, but getting pretty close. So will get very large, has a slightly rounder shaped leaf though, which I really like the look of it. Still has kind of that rippling around the edges. And then this beautiful white variegation, which I have heard this is actually one of the most stable variegated alocasias out there from what I've heard. And they did pop up in my area. I'm trying to remember what store they were in. I want to say maybe it was Home Depot or Lowe's. I remember everybody was going crazy. It was either Home Depot or Lowe's. Everybody was going crazy in the area. Everybody in the Facebook groups were like, has anybody been to a Home Depot or Lowe's in their area today, or this area where I live? Do you know if they have them? People were buying them up to give to other people and everything. And I haven't seen them since then. This was probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, which is a shame because it is an absolutely beautiful plant. Gorgeous. And I think they will also grow in ground here. Now in the winter, they will die back and the corms will come back in the summer. If you're worried about the corms not coming back in the summer, you can always dig them up and overwinter them. maybe I'll do a video on how to overwinter corms here sometime in the near future, because it's almost fall. I can't believe it's almost fall, you guys. That would probably be good. If that would be helpful to you guys that are growing corm or tuber-based plants outside, definitely comment down below and let me know, and I will schedule that video for you. But this is an absolutely stunning plant. Okay, talking about sculptural statement pieces, these next few ones, let me make sure. Oh, I almost forgot about one. Okay, we got 3 more on the list. These are all very sculptural, very stunning, and have similar shaped leaves in the fact, or in the sense that they are very arrowhead shaped. And then most of them do have the rippled kind of edges around them. And I just think they're all absolutely gorgeous. So let's start with the Alocasia Jaclyn, which, by the way, you guys, not technically an Alocasia Jaclyn. I'm totally blanking on the scientific. Tunderosa, I think it's Alocasia tunderosa is the scientific name, something similar to that. I'll flash it up on screen for you. But there's a whole kind of slightly shady history about why it's called the Alocasia Jaclyn. Just know that that's not actually the real name for it. And I think everybody's trying to move back to calling it the Alocasia tunderosa. Once again, I think that's what it's called. But this plant, this is the only leathery leafed plant that I put on the list. I do own an Alocasia Maharani, which is another leather leaf plant, which I don't know if you guys knew this, because I didn't know this until recently, but the Alocasia Maharani is actually a hybrid between the Alocasia Black Velvet and the Alocasia Milo, or Malo, however you pronounce it. I didn't know that until recently. I was kind of shocked by that. So there's a fun little trivia tip for you. But back to this plant. Super leathery leaves, exaggerated tooth-shaped and arrowhead-shaped to this leaf. The one thing that I'm not crazy fan of when it comes to this plant is that the leaves, the variegation, I mean, it is variegated, slightly variegated, I guess. I don't even know if it's technically considered variegation, but the leaves have varying shades of green, and the lighter shades kind of have a slightly yellow appearance to them. That almost makes me question if like a leaf is dying off all the time when I see it. But beyond that, I think it is an absolutely stunning plant. It does get very long petioles. These leaves, like I said, are very arrowhead shaped, and on top of long petioles like that, I just think it looks really, once again, sculptural and makes an amazing statement piece in a room. But the next alocasia I want to look at is the Alocasia Zabina. Now, first I want to look at the regular version of it, because that is what I see more often than not in stores around here, called an Alocasia Zabina, primarily because of the striping, the kind of dark brown, almost blackish striping on the light colored petioles, which is absolutely gorgeous. This plant does get very narrow, very long petioles. And like I said, it has that kind of arrow-shaped leaf up at the top. And in the case of the regular Zabina, it is just solid green. The leaves are just solid green, which I think is absolutely stunning. But what I think is more stunning is the Alocasia Zabina reticulata, which has the same type of petioles with that striping on it. But then look at these leaves, you guys. Also arrowhead shaped, also with the smooth edges, no toothing to them. I think most of the ones I see, the reticulatas, most of the leaves seem a little bit more elongated and a little bit narrower than the regular Zabina, but look at the markings on these leaves. Absolutely beautiful. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like the network Calatheas, where they have the very defined little lines that kind of intersect and whatnot. That's kind of what this reminds me of. I think that's what reticulata means. I'm like, I don't know why today all of a sudden I'm all into what is the Latin meaning of these words for these plants when I never do that before. But if I can remember, or if I can, I'll look it up. I'll flash it up on screen for you for what reticulata means. But I think it's related to lines, and that's why it is called a reticulata. But absolutely beautiful plant. I have never seen one in person in stores around here. I don't even know anybody around here who owns one. But I would absolutely love to own one of these. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, the Zabrinas don't get quite as big as, for example, the Alocasia portoras or the Alocasia odora, but it's still, they can get like pretty tall and pretty big, but I guess we should call it a mid-size Alocasia, if you will. Still a complete and total spider mite from some people I've heard, more so than some others. Although honestly, you guys, For whatever reason, the velvet-leafed alocasias tend to attract spider mites more than other ones, but as I've mentioned to you guys in the past, the thinner the leaf is, also the more prone it's going to be to spider mites. So just stay diligent with preventative treatments on your alocasias and make sure you are checking them thoroughly every time you water them to make sure there's no signs of pests. But the last alocasia I want to take a look at today, and honestly guys, this one didn't come onto my radar until recently, and I'm pretty sure it's going on my wish list because this thing is just too cool looking. Okay, so basically, I'm gonna say this is kind of like if we took an Alocasia Zabina and crossed it with an Alocasia tunderosa, but without the super leatheriness to the leaves. I feel like that is what you get with the Alocasia Batwing. This plant, you guys, so it has the light colored, very elongated, narrow petioles with the brownish, dark brownish, almost blackish speckling striping look to them like the Zabina has, but look at the shape of these leaves. So they are still arrowhead shaped, but they've got that super deep sinus at the top, which is even deeper than on the tunderosa. But then it's got that super jagged, deep toothed edge to it, kind of like the tunderosa. And some of these that I have seen, like, I don't know if it's based on what kind of lighting it's in or whatnot. Some of them have some pretty dark looking leaves that look absolutely stunning. Others have kind of a lighter shade of green to the leaves, but either way, talk about a sculptural plant and a stunning plant and a statement piece of a plant. I mean, this is just absolutely gorgeous looking. I would absolutely love to own one of these. This is going to get relatively large. I think I found one that was pretty mature that I was like, whoa, that I hopefully can throw up here so you guys can see what it looks like. Now, I will remind you that with leaves like this, it typically is not going to have that deep of a sinus or look that toothed as an immature plant. So just know if you really like this and you're now going online while you're watching this video trying to find one to buy and you're seeing small ones that are affordable, but they don't look the same, the leaves will change shape as it matures and start to take on this look. But this is an absolutely gorgeous plant. I'm sure it's a huge spider mite magnet too. But yeah, I had not seen this before and I absolutely love this plant. It's definitely going on my wish list, you guys, but I'll probably, like I said before, grow it from a corm. But those are my top favorite alocasias, you guys. I would love to know what some of your favorite alocasias are, especially if they weren't on this list, so comment down below and let me know. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If so, please be sure to click that like and or subscribe button. And if you need more information on how I care for my alocasias, then you can check out this video next. Thanks so much for joining me today, you guys, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Aloha!